Hi, I'm Michael Strother with Ann Arbor Architecture Chapter, the AIA Huron Valley. We're here in the big house today.
And here comes the Michigan Marching Band, getting ready, building the anticipation, getting ready and lined up for when the team comes out of the hallowed tunnel to start off this Big Ten Conference game. And here we have the press box where all the local and major radio stations are located, as well as the television stations and major cable companies. If they're covering the games, they'll all be up in that press box, as well as the VIPs.
And take the field.
41st reunion of the Michigan cheerleaders. We're very close to the teams coming out. You can see on the scoreboard footage of the team entering the tunnel. They're getting ready to come out. And here they come. And thus, the tunnel, the piece of architecture that allows the blood to flow into this field. And this is what's going to bring life to this stadium right here.
Player. Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
Well, you can see here by the wall down on the field of the stadium, and you can see how high this wall is. So we really get the feeling that we're sunken down, even though we're actually 6 feet higher than the original stadium field was intended to be. You can also see how this wall here is parallel to the playing field, so it's not quite exactly an oval, even though it was kind of themed after the Yale Bowl. But by doing it parallel, it allows these fans to be as close to the action as possible. And of course, they're high enough to see over the heads of all the people that are on the field. Actually playing, or they are actually playing on an artificial turf today. You're not going to get any muddy knees today. The committee wanted this stadium to be built with the utmost simplicity, not to be a memorial of any kind. And you can see as you look around here, it is a fairly simple stadium, good visibility from everywhere. And the last 4 or 5 rows on top were just added since the addition in 1997. Now we're up in the press box on the press level, actually. So this is where all the sports writers are going to be. This is the Media Hall of Fame wall, where you'll have photographs of famous news writers and radio personalities, and my personal favorite, very famous announcer, Bob Ufer. We're outside the stadium right now in the concourse level, and we are on the north side of the stadium, which originally, the north, south, and west side, you would enter the stadium from street level, and you would be at the top row of seats. You can see here, obviously, over the years, more seats have been added, and rings just keep being added on to the outside of the stadium. So now it is coming up above grade a little bit, which was not the original stadium, but it was in the original plan by Yost.
A significant revision to the stadium was made in 2010 that added suites, club seats, restrooms, accessibility features, a new press box, and many infrastructure improvements. The following interview is with the individuals who played a significant role in the transformation.
Hello, I'm Shannon Perry with the Huron Valley chapter of the American Institute of Architects, and I'm here with Bill Martin, previous athletic director for the university for over 10 years, and Doug Hanna, the university architect for more than 20 years. Thank you for your time today, gentlemen. Bill, your legacy is the refurbishing and expansion of the entire athletic campus. And I'm guessing most notably
the Michigan Football Stadium. And Doug, I'm sure you've seen dozens of major projects on this campus, probably billions of dollars worth of construction. I'm guessing also, most notably, the most high-profile project is the football stadium. Tell me a little bit about each of your roles at the time that you were conceiving this project and what your vision was for the outcome of the newer, bigger, big house. How was it that the two of you were able to align your missions and make this work? Bill, let's start with you.
Well, when I came in March of 2000, I commissioned a study to evaluate all of our facilities for each of our 26 sports at that time. Long story short, that study came back and said you've got two major problems, ones that I think the entire Michigan family recognized, Michigan Stadium and Chrysler. So it was on our radar screen from day one that we had to address the problems of Michigan Stadium, or the challenges, if you will. One of my coaches said to me, Bill, Michigan Stadium at best is historic, but it's certainly not up to today's standards. And that was true of so many of our facilities on our campus. And, Michigan Stadium had always been referred to as the big house. We're all proud of the fact that it's the big house, and we wanted to maintain it as the big house. But to grapple with the challenges of renovating and addressing the Michigan big house in terms of today's standards, we had to first straighten out the Michigan athletic department's budget. We did that, and then, as Doug can tell you more specifically than I can, we had to take care of the crumbling concrete throughout the stadium. We had to get Regental approval, and we had to come up with a design that met today's standards.
Doug?
So my role on this project really involves overseeing and managing the design phase. To be honest, my biggest responsibility was to keep this gentleman happy, which was quite a task, to be honest.
I saw it the other way.
Yeah. I had an individual in my office whose name is Rick Reichman, who handled the day-to-day activity on the project, and I provided the oversight. What we did was arrange for and select the architects and hire all the consultants, negotiate all the contracts, and more or less manage all of the day-to-day activity throughout the design phase of the project.
I think your architects who may be viewing this little get-together will be very interested in the challenges we faced in coming up with a design that was compatible to Michigan's athletic campus. And it was a real challenge, and we went through multiple iterations, which Doug can tell you about, until we finally found what we felt would work on our campus and would be acceptable to the greater Michigan family. As you probably remember, this project had 2 years of controversy surrounding it. It did not receive unanimous approval of the regents to begin with, and it was tough getting it approved to move forward. But I think part of the process and the reason we were successful was because of the design architect that Doug brought in. I didn't know him at all, Doug did, and he can tell you about him, and he did a marvelous job.
And how did you evolve to what we have now as the design of the stadium? What was the inspiration for it?
Well, we started with a lot of ideas, and frankly, in the beginning, we were kind of leaning in a direction to look at modern designs for the stadium. I had in my mind the idea of trying to hang on to the existing profile that has been with the Michigan Stadium for so long, where you approach the stadium from the outside and you don't see much. You see just a small two-story structure, and then you approach and get inside the bowl and you're overwhelmed by what's inside. So I kind of began by the idea of trying to sort out a way in which we could kind of hang on to that profile and build something relatively modern that would emanate from it, but not take away from that that form, I should say. But as we got going, we looked at many different options. There were a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and frankly, with the idea of wanting to satisfy the masses of everybody, we ended up taking a look at the architecture that we have within our own campus, and we ended up drawing from the iconic structures, the stately buildings of the Intramural Building and Yost Fieldhouse. They have always read to us as very athletic in appearance, and for that reason, to be honest, it was us in discussion with the architects that Bill mentioned, Coleman, McKinley, and Wood, that brought us to the thinking that we should focus on and take our cues from those structures.
We surveyed season ticket holders about the development several times. The message loud and clear was, to begin with, don't mess with our stadium. This is our church, this is our synagogue, and we don't like change.
Right.
But remember the challenges we faced. We didn't comply with barrier-free design. There were no handrails. It was very difficult for people to get up these stairs without handrails. Our aisles were too narrow. And one of the major challenges in doing all of this, we didn't want the big house to become the little house. I was not going to be the athletic director. And trust me, Doug would have been tossed out along with me if we did not remain the largest stadium in the country. And that was important to us. Mm-hmm. And we actually looked at the whole project from the perspective of 4 different groups. One was the football team. The second was the athletic department. The third was the university itself. And the fourth was the individual fan. We wanted every season ticket holder, every fan that attended a game after this project was completed, to have something in it that improved his game day experience, whether it was accessibility to restrooms, handrails, you name it. We wanted everybody to say, boy, this has improved my game day experience. It's interesting, the team itself, they wanted a home field advantage. And if you remember the old stadium, with it being very shallow, the sound leaked out. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the 2 new structures on each side, they are actually angled in towards the field to reflect sound back on the field itself to create more fan noise. And we did acoustical studies before and after to reflect that. In fact, even when just the structural steel was up, we could see the difference on the field in terms of the sound. So we had the team itself, the players, we had the fans, we had the athletic department, and we had the university, what was in it for them. If you were to talk to the vice president for development, he once said to me, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel, because all the major donors are here on Saturdays, and it's so much easier to be able to go around in some of the premium seating we have and talk to them about whether it's the business school, the law school, the hospital, whatever, in terms of helping us in furthering the mission of the university. And for the athletic department, it certainly helped us in fundraising. It helped us in recruiting better athletes, not only to football, to all our other sports. We have 3 programs that generate positive revenues for the department: football, basketball, and hockey at Michigan. But in addition, just the Block M is such a powerful brand that the media rights that we receive through the Big Ten, as well as the branding on clothing, where we receive royalties, they are major contributors.
And so it still is the largest American football stadium. Even when it was first built in 1927, it had 82,000 seats. That's amazing to me at that time to start out that big. And now the seating capacity is over 109,000, with, I think, the record attendance last September at the Notre Dame game was over 115,000 people in the stadium. Not only the largest football crowd, but now holds the record for the largest hockey crowd as well. Mm-hmm. For the New Year's Day this year, Toronto Maple Leafs against the Detroit Red Wings, that had over 105,000 people. So as you mentioned, it goes way beyond, I mean, we're talking about tradition that goes back to when it started in the 20s. And you mentioned already how important that is for the university. How far-reaching in the community is it? I mean, do you have any measurable feedback from your fans, where they come from? I know they're coming from all over the state, many states. Have you had any feedback since the stadium is completed?
When we were in the design phase, I can tell you my picture was up in every post office in Michigan. People were not happy. And I really learned to appreciate and respect the passion that our fans had. They didn't want us to touch the big house. And it was really scary for me. I went home multiple nights and worried about it, and this guy saved me and saved Michigan. He may not see it that way, but that's the way I see it, because he found the design architect that came up with an end product that everyone loves. Once the structural steel was up for this project, people could get the scale of it. And they saw that it fit the scale of the site and the athletic campus. From that moment on, when the structural steel came up, my picture came down from the post offices. I received no further emails that you're destroying my stadium. It was really passionate. And for those of us who are a little bit older, will remember when the halo was around the stadium, and that was done in when, Doug?
I don't know the dates, but it was probably,
Mid-90s?
yeah, mid to late 90s.
The editor of the Ann Arbor News told me that they had received more letters to the editor, mind you, there wasn't email at that
That was
time,
incredible.
on the halo and how it destroyed the stadium. That really put our antenna up as being really sensitive
Right.
to what we did. And I have to say a little aside, one of the things I'm very proud of is that when Lee Bollinger asked me to stay on as permanent AD, I said I'll do it under only one condition, and that is I get to take down the halo. And everybody asked me, what did you do with all those big letters that were on the stadium? We destroyed them. We didn't want to see them on eBay anytime in the future.
Smart move.
The very interesting solutions that is embodied in this project is the Main Street face. When we were looking at all the different various ways of designing the additions to the bowl, we were trying very hard to try not to impose on Main Street too much. And by doing that, we actually had plans that showed us stepping back from Main Street. And it caused a lot of issues with respect to the space within the concourse. By stepping back, pulling back the exterior wall, we ended up breaking the concourse into two halves. One half that would be interior to the building, and the other half that would be outside in the site. And the architect that Bill's referring to ended up coming up with the idea of taking the exterior wall and putting it right on the face of Main Street. And in answer to the issue about whether we impose too much on Main Street, what his suggestion was is to take that wall and use it as a screen wall, which it now is. It's open, so when you're on Main Street and you look at that major masonry wall, you see right through it because it's open to the sky. And that provided the outside structure right up to Main Street, and it allowed us to take the entire concourse and make it one large area, interior to the building, but very open, and the circulation through it is a lot more improved because of what he chose to do with that. So on both sides of the building, we have the outside walls that actually, as he put it, stands proud from the towers. And the one on Main Street actually acts as a screen rather than a building face.
That was really brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We fought with that. One of the problems and challenges was we didn't have enough real estate outside the stadium itself for 100,000 plus fans at halftime coming in. And to the university's credit, when the city of Ann Arbor wanted to widen Main Street, the university gave a permanent easement to the city so they could add an additional lane to Main Street, which means that the concourse was narrowed and created more challenges. But the screen wall made use of everything for us, and it was absolutely brilliant. And every time I go around there, I look at it, I think about when you, Doug, first explained it to me. It took a little bit to let me understand it, that you could see through it, but the purpose of it became really brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we used the inside of that screen wall, perhaps you've noticed it or you could show it, because this university is public, we wanted to do something in the stadium that would let every citizen of the state of Michigan, regardless of what county they're from, feel a part of it. So we put the names of all the counties on each of our columns as you go around in stone. How many counties are there? Is it 74?
Quite a few, I don't remember.
I think it's 74. So you can go around and see the name of every county. And what you see on a football Saturday is you'll see people go under the sign of their county and have their picture taken in Michigan Stadium. And again, it was a gesture to let the people of Michigan know this is theirs.
That's great. And I can attest that the circulation does work. I attended a game this past season, came south in the concourse, and then after the game exited and walked back on the sidewalk, and the flow was fine. I mean, masses of people going in both directions, and yet there was really no area where we were bogged down. It worked out quite well.
One of the stories I like that you should talk about really is the idea that as we evolved the concept of doing the stadium, we had, of course, in mind 83 suites and a lot of club seats, and some of the resistance from people that had been coming to the stadium for many years was the idea of wanting to have all the seats be equal in the stadium and have everybody on an equal footing rather than having special areas for special people. But when you look back at the history of the stadium and you see the very early stadium that we actually had boxes. We had special seats that you paid more to have those special areas. So it isn't a new idea.
Not at all. They were right down on the field level, and they had iron railings around them. It was just like the old Briggs Stadium in Detroit where the Lions and the Tigers played. So we've had it since day one. We've also had personal seat licenses because Yost needed to finance the stadium privately to a certain extent. So he sold seat licenses for 10 years. And I would go around and show a copy of the bonds that he sold to people. And they said as long as the bond was in effect and we hadn't paid it off for 10 years, you'll get to sit in a better seat. And what I did to try to address the issue of, if you will, those who can afford to pay for premium seating and those that can't, is the 5,000 or so premium seats totally paid to renovate the stadium for another 105,000. So it's a very significant concept. And to begin with, there was pushback on doing both sides. If you remember, Doug, even Mary Sue Coleman to begin with, who became one of our great champions, and this project wouldn't have happened without her. But she was a little timid about doing the structures on both sides. Why don't you just do one and let's see if you can lease it? There was concern if we could deliver the project within budget, and secondly, could we lease everything? Well, it turned out that was not a problem at all, and I never thought it was going to be a problem. We were able to deliver it on budget, and we did lease everything the first year.
And talk a little bit, Doug, about the timetable, because this was almost a 3-year span of construction, but you had football seasons within the construction time.
There was a lot of strategy that was placed into having the stadium usable during the seasons. So we put a lot of effort, planning, and money into having the stadium be brought up to usability, I guess, at the point we start this, the 2 seasons that we went through. So it was very complex, very important, and it was in our minds and in our planning efforts from the very beginning.
Where we're sitting now is where we had the former press box, and we literally had to tear it down to put up the structural steel. Then we had to rebuild it around that structural steel so we could play football during that year and have a press box to use.
So that was like a temporary...
Yeah.
Then we had to remove the press box down, through, and out underneath the new structure. It's very
And did that occur twice then? Were there 2 football seasons during the construction?
There were 2 seasons, yes, but the press box was particular structural issues that Bill's talking about really was for the 1 season.
Mm-hmm. Any other particular features we should know about?
It's important to mention that, as much as there were many things we wanted to do, there were some things we didn't want to do. We didn't want to mess with the bowl. The most spectacular part of the stadium is the bowl, the way the bowl sits and the size of it. We didn't want to mess with that. Of course, we didn't want to reduce the number of seats. And we wanted to improve to a large degree the game day experience for everybody. And one of the things we did was to make it easier for the elderly and the disabled to be able to make their way down these many rows of seats through the aisles. So we wanted to put handrails in the aisles. And to do that, we had to widen the aisles in order to meet code. As a result, we had to lose a lot of seats to accomplish that. So adding the seats with the suites and the clubs compensated for losing the seats to make the stadium much more accessible. They almost balanced out. But it was very important for us to manage the project in a way that would maintain the quantity of seats and, of course, not mess with the form and shape and appearance of the bowl.
Any other features that you want to recall?
Well, we didn't add any parking, Doug, which would have been wonderful if we could have done it, but we were landlocked. One thing, I'm so pleased how many barrier-free design seats, wheelchair seats we've been able to add. And I don't even think to today they're all used, and if not, that's great. But there are a lot of folks that were confined to a wheelchair that we didn't know what the demand was going to be. There was a standard of 0.5% of the capacity of the stadium that you had to meet. And what we found is by creating the additional seating for wheelchair individuals and their companion, a lot more people came and used those seats that were wheelchair bound. And that made me feel pretty good, because every seat that you created takes about 11 seats out of the bowl. And at least I wanted to make certain they were used, and they were.
So that's good. You're happy when you see them being used then,
Yeah.
for sure.
I can tell you one other thing that was very interesting to us, to me particularly, was what's the ratio of outside club seats to inside club seats. So outside club seats are, you sit outside, but you can take 10 steps up and you're inside a nice warm air-conditioned club with TVs and food and all that stuff, versus totally enclosed. The market research that we did, and of course you do infinite number of market research studies before you launch a project like this, because you've got to get it right. So our market research people said you needed to have more indoor club seats than you have. Well, it just so happened on our staff, we had Joe Parker. And Joe Parker was our director of development, and he had been at Texas when they launched a renovation of their stadium. He had been at Oklahoma when they had launched their stadium renovation. And he looked at the numbers and he said, they've got it wrong. We need more outside club. And he was relentless to have us change from what the market research showed. And we did. And he was absolutely right. If I look at it again, we might have gone all outdoor club.
Do you know I signed a purchase order today to launch a study to look at how we can open up the indoor club to
Is that
make
right?
it more present to the field.
Well, Joe Parker was right.
Yeah, he was. He was
You know.
good for us.
And so we had one individual that had a major impact on that initial design.
And I think over on the other building, on the east side at least, we were in some suites where the windows were operable. So you could open them at
They're
least.
all operable.
They're all operable.
All the suites are
Okay.
operable.
Right.
Not the club, not the indoor club, but the suites
The
are all
suites are.
operable. And they're all without motors. You just,
Right.
they're counterbalanced.
I think you want to hear the other fans.
Absolutely.
You want to hear the game, the
Yeah,
band.
it makes a big
I mean,
difference.
It's all
Right.
Makes a
part of
big
it.
difference.
And you don't want it piped in.
No,
either.
no.
We
really
piped
don't.
in the indoor club and it just doesn't get it.
Right. Exactly.
Now, the last game of the year when you're freezing and snowing,
Yeah,
you probably
that's-
look up there and say, oh, those people are warm.
Right.
Absolutely right.
So there were a number of other things we did as part of the project. We, besides the clubs and the suites, we increased the number of bathroom facilities substantially, particularly the women's. But we probably maybe 1.5 times as many as original. We doubled the press area, which was a significant increase in improvement. We improved circulation and access that I talked about. We put in a pretty sophisticated sound system, and then scoreboards as well that weren't immediately part of the project but came along coincidental with it. And then of course we, as Bill mentioned, improved the sound quality of the crowd. It's an important factor in football games, and it's something we lacked in Michigan Stadium because of the open shape of the bowl. So one of my objectives, all of us had the objective actually of trying to make that crowd noise more enhanced. And we did that by, on the buildings, making the choice, as Bill mentioned, to lean in the exterior walls that improved the sight lines as well as provided the ability to reflect the sound back into the stadium and make it a little bit noisier during the critical points of the games.
Some of the things you don't see that we also did as a part of the project, we totally renovated the visitors' locker room, which was pretty rough. Bunch of nails pounded on a 2x4 on a wall, a hot water system that didn't work. I felt so embarrassed when Wisconsin was here in their old locker room, because 2 times in a row they came here and something broke in the hot water system and they didn't get hot water to shower after the games. And I still hear it from their athletic director about that. But, you know, we set up a commissary, we reorganized where, you know, the semi-trailers come. So it just made it so much more convenient. We spent a considerable amount of money getting the video trucks out of the concourse. If you recall, they were always backing right up to the press box. Well, we put all the conduit underground over to north of the stadium where we could have them set up their control trucks to work. And that was a big expense, but we knew we were going to have to do that to make certain there was a free flow of traffic within the concourse.
We also added a number of points of sale for the concessions too. That was another improvement we made for the average attendee.
And then of course, where we got lucky is we financed a couple $100 million of this project. And we did it at a really reasonable tax-exempt interest rate. As a real estate developer, that was important to me. How are we going to be able to pay off the bonds over time? And so, working with Tim Slotto, our Executive Vice President for Finance, we were able to hit the financial markets at a low point and receive very favorable long-term financing. And then we were able to raise an awful lot of money in the stadium itself with naming rights, and we had a lot of people step up and help us, and they still continue to do that.
And I understand now the facility is used for a lot of other purposes as well. Apparently the East Building is booking up for weddings and proms, and we have hockey games here, high school and college and NHL games here.
That was after my time.
Yeah, that is true.
It's a beautiful facility for any catering function. I understand people even get married right down on the field. Now we have permanent lights. Night games are now part of the reality.
That creates a totally different dynamic. You know, a third of our fans live in southeastern Michigan. I'm sorry, a third of our season ticket holders live in southeastern Michigan. Another third live in the lower peninsula of the state. And then the balance come from every state in the country. That first night game against Notre Dame couldn't have come off better. It was perfect. And kudos to Dave Brandon for putting that together. I wouldn't have had the guts to do it, so just because of the pushback when folks have to drive back home, etc. But it really was a very special evening.
The lights seem, I've been to a night game and the lights seem to work quite well. No problems for the players on the field. Certainly the fans get to see everything.
Well, they play in high school Friday night, don't they? But, you know, the tradition has always been, you know, you'd love to start your games at 1 o'clock on Saturday. That's the way we all grew up. But with the advent of television and the opportunities we have to get at least 3 of our conference games on Saturdays, there's 3 time slots. There's the early, which is like 1 o'clock. There's the mid one, which is 3:30, and then there's the evening one, the prime time.
3:30.
Yeah, noon now.
Right.
But there's 3, so it depends which time slot you get put in. And everybody wants to know when those games are going to be, and you don't know because the Big Ten will decide, in our case, based on who our opponent is and how well we're doing in the season. And that's why sometimes you don't know till 2 weeks before. So people can't plan weddings. We always got a lot of questions about, okay, this year, when's the Michigan State game? Or when's the Ohio State game? What time? But it's the reality of today's world in college athletics.
So is the stadium good for a while now?
It's a good question.
Who knows?
For our
What's
lifetime, right,
next?
Doug?
It depends. Depends on a lot of things.
Well, it must be great for both of you to have this as part of your legacy here at Michigan.
Absolutely. And
It's
you know,
incredible.
Doug made certain that we could expand it in each end zone, either by adding a second deck, exterior deck, I can't remember how many seats that was, or we could extend the enclosed seating all the way around and wrap it. So we have that option for future generations.
We schemed it for the purpose of placing some of the elements that were part of this project in a way that we wouldn't have to change it in the future if we ever chose to do that.
That's why you put in all those extra bathrooms, right?
That's bathrooms for some of them.
For the women, the men don't have potty parity anymore, I'll tell you that.
I have to say, I remember that there was not a line in women's, and that's great. When you're in the middle of the game, you want to hurry up and get back out there.
And we met our objectives.
It works out really well, at least from my standpoint.
Right.
I think from the general population, too. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And this is going to be a great little addition to Michael Strother's project to get all the great pieces of architecture in Ann Arbor on podcasts so that for years to come the tourists can come and hear your stories.
There you go. Thanks for
It's our pleasure.
having us.
The M Fanfare.